Hey guys, tonight we march back through time, not with glory, not with grandeur, but with cold hands, muddy boots, and absolutely no idea when the next hot drink is coming. You trudge across an endless French plain wrapped in a too-short wool coat, wishing anyone would invent anything that resembled coffee. But it's 1802. You're in Napoleon's army. And spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, where are you tuning in from? Drop your location and your local time in the comments. I love seeing how far this little history caravan stretches. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The mud is thick enough to suck off a boot if you don't step just right. You try to keep pace with the others, but every so often someone trips, curses, and sinks a little too far. It's morning technically, but the sun hasn't shown up yet, probably too ashamed to see the state of things. And you're mostly thinking about two things when the next rest stop is, and what warm, bitter thing could possibly chase away the fog clinging to your bones. Spoiler, it's not going to be cocoa. Napoleon's army doesn't have time for luxury. You carry hard bread that shatters if you blink at it too aggressively. Cheese that fights back. Wine that's more vinegar than vibe, and coffee that's still a rich man's indulgence. Or so it was. But the winds are shifting. You pass a captain muttering to himself about bean shipments and boil time. There are whispers, rumors even, that someone in Paris is working on a way to make coffee portable. Instant even. Whatever that means. At this point, you drink mud filtered through a sock. And let's be honest, you probably already have. Marching starts again. Your feet are numb. The road is endless. Somewhere ahead, a mule cart squeaks along, guarded like treasure. Inside, nothing glamorous. Just sacks, smelling faintly of roast. Could it be? Maybe. Historically speaking, coffee has already begun its takeover of Europe. By the late 18th century, cafes in Paris are the place to be for gossip, philosophy, and plotting revolutions over espresso. But the battlefield. That's where ideas get tested, especially the dumb ones. Someone somewhere, perhaps inspired by the soggy complaints of soldiers, suggests this: what if coffee didn't need to be brewed fresh every time? What if it could be cooked down, preserved, and carried in a tin? It's the seed of an idea, or rather the bean of an idea. But right now you don't know any of that. You just know that your fingers are cold, your boots are wet, and the only thing in your pocket is a crumb of bread and a suspiciously warm pebble. You settle into camp. Fires begin to sputter across the ridge like sleepy stars. Someone nearby swears their cousin in Lyon has tasted this new essence of coffee. Says it comes in thick tar-like globs you scoop into hot water. Another soldier snorts and says, if it doesn't come in a porcelain cup, it's not coffee, it's punishment. You don't care? You'd drink shoe polish if it meant warmth. A nearby pot boils. Someone adds something to it. Not chicory, not bark, but something darker, oily, bitter. The scent drifts toward you, not strong, not like the cafes in Paris, but familiar. Coffee. Maybe. You inch closer. Someone hands you a dented tin cup. You sip. It's not great, but it's warm and bitter, and somehow it feels like waking up, just a little. You glance up at the stars. Same sky. But the ground feels different now. You might not have real boots, or dry socks, or a functioning digestive system. But this could be the start of something, even if it tastes like roasted regret. The morning rolls in sideways, dragging fog and the scent of scorched grass. Your joints creak like the wheels of the supply cart you slept beside, and someone's already shouting about moving out. You groan, sit up, and instinctively reach for the tin you stashed under your cloak last night. It's empty, of course. But for a moment you remember the warmth, the slight bitterness, the strange oily mouthfeel that lingered like overcooked stew. That was coffee, or something attempting to be. Not fresh, not fragrant, but real enough to count. And the word is spreading. You aren't the only one who noticed. Around the campfires, soldiers are whispering in between bites of hard biscuit and suspiciously gray cheese. Not about tactics or enemy positions, those are background noise. They're talking about that coffee. Where did it come from? Can you get more? Did anyone manage to stash some extra? You glance over at the supply cart. One of the quartermasters is doling out rations with the emotional availability of a broken doorknob. You sidle over and ask as casually as one can while drooling slightly whether the dark essence is included in today's share. He grunts, digs through a crate, pulls out a sealed tin scuffed and scratched and labeled with a scrawl that could be either a batch number or a recipe for disaster. He hands it to you. It feels weighty, promising. The French army is nothing if not experimental, especially when it comes to keeping men alive long enough to march another 100 kilometers. And as word of this portable coffee spreads, command takes notice. See, in Paris, scientists and chemists have been fiddling with the problem of food preservation for a while now. Enter a name that sounds like it should belong to a perfumer but actually marks one of the unsung heroes of army logistics, Nicolas Appert. A confectioner by trade and a tinkerer by compulsion, Appert had already begun experimenting with ways to preserve edibles for long campaigns. Sealing food in glass jars, boiling them to keep spoilage at bay, this was radical stuff. And though it hadn't yet been perfected, it inspired others, especially when the reward involved Napoleon offering cash prizes. Now, coffee preservation wasn't Appert's specific project, but the mentality caught fire if you could preserve peas and gravy. Why not something that actually gave you the will to keep living? Soon, several Parisian suppliers begin testing coffee concentrate recipes. Some mix it with sugar. Others boil it into thick pastes. One even bakes it into dense bricks the size of a fist. Allegedly chewable, though mostly by people with no remaining molars. You unwrap your tin with the solemnity of opening a treasure chest. Inside is a dark, grainy sludge that smells promising. You boil some water barely. The fire sputters like it's unionized and only works Tuesdays. You stir the coffee in with a stick. It dissolves slowly, resists even. But finally, you lift the tin to your lips. Not as bad as last time, not good either. But this time, you expected the taste of burnt rope. So it feels drinkable. Around you, other soldiers do the same. Some grimace, some grunt approvingly. One yells, "It's hot wine for cowards," and then proceeds to finish his cup faster than anyone else. Quirky fact. Some troops, especially those in elite regiments, began adding whatever was lying around to their brew rum honey. Even gunpowder for that extra morning kick. Do not try that at home unless you enjoy spontaneous combustion. Historians still argue whether Napoleon himself really drank the preserved coffee or merely approved its testing. Some say he was a fan of anything that kept soldiers moving. Others claim he still preferred a strong café au lait in a china cup with 2 sugars, which honestly feels very on brand. But the fact remains, coffee, instant or otherwise, was no longer a Parisian pastime. It was now a weapon of war. Sort of. Maybe more of a warm encouragement of war. And you're starting to rely on it. The march resumes. Your feet still hurt. Your back still aches, but your eyes feel clearer. The rhythm of your steps is steadier. That tiny tin, that questionable drink, that pocket-sized miracle, it's doing something. You glance up at the sky. Gray. Always gray. But somehow it feels a little less bleak. Because you've got backup now. Even if it tastes like something scraped off a forge. Your boots squelch through another anonymous patch of road that might once have been a village trail but now mostly resembles a soup of regret. Somewhere behind you, someone sneezes directly into their jacket. Up ahead, an officer yells something no one intends to obey. You're not thinking about strategy or maps. You're thinking about the tin in your coat pocket and whether it can survive another accidental kick down a ditch. The first time you brewed it, it was an accident. The second time, that was intention. And now it's routine. The morning ritual spreads like gossip in the ranks. Tins passed hand to hand, bits of wood carved into makeshift spoons, fire pits dug in secret when camp discipline frowns on personal flames. It becomes a kind of theater, the shivering, the hopeful crack of the tin's seal, the slow swirl of brown into water, the first sip, the soft sigh that follows. Is it good? No. But is it everything? Yes. Your squad mate Jacques has turned it into an art form. He swears by a ratio of 1 spoonful per breath of wind. You're not sure what that means, but his brew is the least terrible. Rumor has it he stirs counterclockwise to confuse the bitterness. Meanwhile, Luke uses a musket barrel to warm his water. Effective, if slightly radioactive. He says the metal adds character. You're beginning to suspect that's what he calls botulism. But here's the secret. No one says aloud it's not the taste that matters. It's the ritual. One steaming cup before the day's horrors begin. One moment of warmth in a world of wet uniforms, soggy bread, and trench foot. It's the brief illusion of civilization. Quirky detail. Some soldiers got so used to the bitter sludge that they began developing recipes. Yes, recipes for camp coffee variations. A pinch of salt here, a drop of wine there. One sergeant allegedly boiled his coffee with horse marrow for depth. He also had no friends. Your own concoction has evolved. You now pre-mix it before the fire's even hot. You hum while stirring. It feels almost cozy. You're not alone. The officers catch wind of it too. Suddenly, your commanding captain is standing a little too close during brew time, asking innocent questions like, how's the water temperature, or do you smell cinnamon? You know what he wants. You offer a cup, he sniffs it, sips it, and just for a moment his shoulders relax. He nods once. That's the new gold star. From there, the pattern spreads. Campfires flicker all around, not just for heat anymore, but for coffee duty. Tiny squads brew side by side. The smell, acrid, burnt, oddly comforting, hangs over the camp like a caffeine-scented cloud of hope. And then there are the stories. Coffee turns soldiers into philosophers. Someone quotes Voltaire, who supposedly drank 40 cups a day. Another claims coffee improves aim, though his target was a tree and he missed 3 times. Still, it gives everyone something to debate besides lice. Historians still argue whether this early form of instant coffee truly affected battlefield performance. Did it boost alertness? Did it just warm bellies? Or was it purely psychological? A minor miracle in a miserable landscape. The records are vague, but the anecdotes pour in like overboiled water. You finish your cup, it's lukewarm now. Gritty. You don't care. It did its job. It reminded you you're human. The march resumes, boots slapping in unison. Your muscles complain, but your brain hums just a little sharper, a little more alive. That sluggish fog that usually trails behind you, gone. For now. And as the column winds down another nameless valley, you wonder, what will tonight's brew taste like? Hopefully less like gun barrel and more like something your grandmother wouldn't cry about. But honestly, you'll take either. Because out here in the long slog of mud and frost and boredom, a bitter tin cup is your best friend. You trudge up a slope with boots that haven't been dry since the Battle of Somewhere You Forgot, and the only thing keeping your eyelids from surrendering is the faint memory of that morning's brew. It wasn't good. It never is. But it was. And that alone feels heroic. Words started to spread beyond your unit. Other regiments are grumbling less in the morning and forming hushed semicircles around blackened kettles. The army isn't exactly energized, but it's marginally less corpse-like. Command takes notice, which brings us awkwardly to Napoleon himself. You haven't met him. You probably won't. But you hear things, like how he supposedly sleeps 4 hours a night and never dreams, that he rides for days without stopping, and occasionally shouts entire battle strategies while chewing on stale bread. None of that's confirmed, but one rumor that one's spreading fast. Napoleon is into coffee, like really into it. He's said to down it by the cupful even during briefings. One general claimed he once drank 6 cups in a single sitting, and then demanded everyone take off their boots and compare foot blisters. That part might be exaggerated. Still, it paints a picture the emperor appreciates a good jolt. So when he hears that some chemists in Paris are experimenting with concentrated, travel-friendly forms of coffee, he doesn't scoff. He funds it. See, Napoleon isn't just a battlefield genius. He's obsessed with logistics. Getting thousands of men from point A to point B while they remain alive and minimally mutinous. That takes innovation. Food preservation has already become a scientific frontier, and coffee fits perfectly into that puzzle. He reportedly issues a challenge: whoever can develop a shelf-stable, easy-to-carry form of coffee for the army gets government support. Prestige, maybe even a handshake, or at least a letter with impressive calligraphy. That's when things escalate. Enter the laboratories. Parisian apothecaries and tinkerers begin boiling, drying, steeping, and burning beans in every configuration imaginable. One early version involved boiling ground beans down into a thick syrup, then drying that syrup into cakes that could be rehydrated later. The result: a concentrated puck with the texture of roof tar and the flavor of betrayal. Another method involves steeping grounds with sugar and brandy, then drying the mixture into chewy pellets. These were allegedly delicious but highly flammable. Historians still argue whether Napoleon truly endorsed these methods or merely tolerated them. Some say he carried his own silver travel set and preferred fresh ground beans from Egypt. Others argue he saw the instant variety as the future of warfare, more portable than wine, less risky than beer. Whatever his personal preference, he allowed it. And once the high command gives even a nod of approval, the rest of the military falls in line like ducks chasing a baguette. Soon, crates of coffee extract are shipped to regiments. Tins appear alongside gunpowder. Some are labeled with elegant cursive. Others just say café in blocky, worried letters. You receive your first official ration during a lull in the march. It's in a smaller tin, sealed with wax, and smells faintly of burned toast and glue. You pry it open with your bayonet, always a safe culinary tool, and scoop out a thumb-sized glob. You're suspicious. You boil water, stir it in. You sip. Oh, it's stronger than before. Thicker. And while the aftertaste is still a little like licking a cannon wheel, there's real caffeine in there. You feel it. A kind of pulsing awareness in your temples. Your fingers twitch. Your boots don't seem quite so heavy. Jacques tries it and declares it acceptable. Luke adds rum and declares it a spiritual experience. You just drink and keep walking, because this is progress. Slow, bitter, possibly hazardous progress. Quirky aside, some of the earliest preserved coffee tins reportedly came with tiny instructions etched into the lid like add water or boil until spirit leaves body. One set allegedly included a cartoon of a smiling goat, a callback to the mythical origins of coffee's discovery in Ethiopia. Whether that goat was ever officially approved by the French military remains unknown. You finish your tin. There's more where that came from, but you wonder how long before it changes again. Because if history has taught you anything, it's this: once Napoleon gets an idea, things escalate quickly. The smell hits you first, burnt, slightly sweet, and oddly metallic. You round a bend near the camp kitchens, and there it is. A table cluttered with tiny pots, half-melted ladles, and several soldiers wearing expressions typically reserved for people inspecting spoiled milk. Welcome to the alchemical cook-off, an unofficial gathering of France's finest battlefield chemists and accidental poisoners, all trying to make instant coffee not taste like despair. You step closer, wary. One pot hisses, another bubbles in a way that suggests it might become sentient if stirred wrong. But there's excitement in the air. Chaotic, jittery, highly caffeinated excitement. You've stumbled into the center of the coffee experiment revolution, where science, desperation, and a truly reckless sense of taste combine. The current favorite among the amateur innovators is Essence de Café Concentré, A syrupy black goo boiled down from pre-brewed coffee thickened with sugar and sometimes weirdly egg whites. The egg is meant to bind impurities. Instead, it makes the drink taste like regret soufflé. You're handed a sample, it jiggles. You sip, it's bold, sort of bitter, sort of sweet, definitely sticky. A sergeant nearby calls it robust. You call it legally edible. Jacques mutters something about shoe polish again. Luke adds a splash of wine, declares it art, and begins reciting poetry. He might be hallucinating. You can't rule it out. Here's the historical twist. This stuff isn't entirely bad. For one, it keeps. Unlike beans, which go stale or moldy, this syrup can survive weeks in the bottom of a knapsack, next to socks and salted fish. It dissolves in hot water, cold water, sometimes even wine, though that last one creates a reaction most commanding officers don't appreciate. The concoction begins to spread past from cook to cook. Soldier to soldier, sometimes improved and sometimes ruined entirely. One unit creates a variation using chicory root, which is technically not coffee but fools the taste buds enough to make people believe they're awake. Another group adds burnt bread crusts for body creating. A brew affectionately nicknamed pain café or bread juice. Historians still argue whether this proliferation of recipes was innovation or desperation. Some see it as the grassroots birth of modern instant coffee. Others insist it was battlefield folklore gone wild, fueled by boredom and boredom's more caffeinated cousin optimism. The High Command watches carefully. Orders are issued to standardize the best formulas. Tins are sent back to Paris for refinement. Taste testing becomes part of the supply officer's duties, right after checking for weevils and lying about shoe sizes. Soon you're issued a new version. A black rubbery slab wrapped in waxed paper. The packaging suggests it be sliced and dissolved. It resembles a very unfortunate brownie. You break off a corner, toss it in your cup, and stir. The result, still terrible, but a different kind of terrible. Less tar, more molasses, fewer bitter shards, a hint of what coffee used to be. One fringe alchemist in the unit starts mixing the essence with powdered meat broth, creating a beef-coffee hybrid so offensive it nearly sparks a mutiny. Another brave soul adds mint leaves, accidentally creating a toothpaste-like concoction that gains brief popularity before being banned by command. And yet, amidst the culinary chaos, something profound happens. You begin to crave it. Not just the warmth, not just the buzz, but the ritual, the boiling, the stirring, the sipping. The way even the worst-tasting cup connects you to every soldier across every muddy mile. The way this strange, bitter goo becomes hope, portable, packable, drinkable, sort of. You think back to the first time you tried it. The confusion, the bitterness, the stringy mouthfeel. And now you barely flinch. You drink it like it's normal. Because for you and the thousands around you, it is. This is how history changes, not in declarations, but in sips. One soldier at a time. One cup of nonsense that becomes a necessity. You don't know who invented the final recipe. Probably several people. Maybe no one. Maybe it just evolved like a stubborn species of wartime fungus. But here in the steam, the laughter, and the mild stomach discomfort, something new is being born. And despite it all, you want another cup. You squat beside a flickering campfire, watching the pot tremble with the enthusiasm of a nervous actor before curtain call. Tonight's brew isn't syrup or paste or slab, it's something new. Issued directly from the quartermaster's cart, wrapped in brown paper stamped with Réserve Impériale and shaped like a small brick. You tap it against your boot. It thuds like a loaf of yesterday's artillery bread. Ah yes, the next evolution in military fuel condensed coffee blocks. You unwrap one and break off a corner with your teeth. Bad idea. It's like chewing the heel of an old boot dipped in molasses. But you press on, toss the rest into your tin, and pour hot water over it. It bubbles reluctantly, then sinks with a heavy sigh, just like you most mornings. Someone mutters it smells better than it tastes, and everyone nods because that phrase now applies to 80% of the army's rations. Still, you drink because you have to. The introduction of these coffee blocks marks a logistical triumph. You no longer need to carry spoons or worry about leaks. Just break, brew, and brace yourself. They're durable, stackable, and oddly aerodynamic, something the officers learn when one soldier hurls a cube at a horse thief and knocks him clean off his saddle. It's effective, not delicious, but efficient. And in Napoleon's army, efficiency is flavor. The blocks become part of your daily routine. Issued alongside gunpowder and hardtack, tucked between cartridges and socks. Some soldiers whittle their initials into them. Others carve dice from the denser batches and gamble over who has to make the next pot. One guy, Etienne, insists the blocks are better roasted over fire before brewing. He's probably right, but also has third-degree burns on 3 fingers. Sacrifices must be made. Historians still argue whether this solid essence was truly functional or just an elaborate placebo. The caffeine content varied wildly. Some batches did nothing but stain your cup. Others made your ears hum and convinced you the birds were spying. You glance around camp. More fires, more steaming cups, more faces with that not quite awake, not quite dead look. It's working. Kind of. Of course, nothing in the French military is without its quirks. A few of the blocks, especially the early ones, were wrapped in waxed linen. If you forgot to unwrap them before brewing, which happened more often than you'd think, you ended up with a film of floating fabric on your drink. The army quickly revised instructions to include remove outer layer, s'il vous plaît. There's even an unofficial manual making the rounds. The Art of Camp Café. It's a handwritten booklet passed between soldiers filled with advice like stir clockwise during odd-numbered days and never brew while marching unless your trousers are waterproof. The blocks soon inspire a black market. Some men trade them for boots, firewood, even letters from home. One enterprising fellow in your unit slices them thin and sells coffee slivers like tobacco. His tent smells incredible. Also, he hasn't slept in 3 days. Your own stash dwindles. You ration them carefully now, half a block in the morning, half before night watch. You've learned the perfect ratio of water to cube, the precise tilt of the tin, the exact second before it goes from bitter to undrinkable. It's become comforting, familiar. Even Jacques has stopped complaining. Well, almost. One night as you sip under the stars, your captain joins you. No rank, no orders. Just 2 men staring at steam rising into darkness. He doesn't ask to share. He just pulls out his own tin, drops in his cube, and waits. The silence is heavy but not unfriendly. You both sip. Then he says, "Do you think we'll still drink this if we survive?" You shrug, "Probably not." He nods. "But we'll remember it." And you will, because this coffee, hard, bitter, uninvited, is now part of you. Part of your days, your nights, your aching feet, and half-laughed jokes. It's not just a drink, it's a companion. Even if it tastes like scorched socks, morning comes like a slap with a wet glove. The wind smells faintly of cabbage and cannon smoke, and your spine cracks like a tree branch when you stretch. You roll over, fumble for your canteen, and pat your coat pocket for the sacred item, one last cube of condensed coffee. Cracked at the corner, a bit lint-covered, but still solid. A treasure. Camp is stirring. Horses snort. Boots thud. Someone sneezes into eternity. But mostly the mood is tense, something about a new march order, more mud, less food, and a high chance of rain that hits you sideways. Still, there's a glimmer of joy hovering over the campfires. Because today's cube has arrived, and for the first time it came with the rations. This is it, standardization. Gone are the days of haggling with the quartermaster for odd-smelling goo. Now each soldier receives one neat cube wrapped in oil paper stamped with the imperial crest. It's shiny, official. It even feels more caffeinated. The mood is strangely upbeat. That is until someone bites into one raw and instantly regrets every life choice that led to that moment. The thing is harder than ambition. It chips a tooth. Jacques laughs so hard he spills his entire brew. You pretend not to hear your stomach growl in mourning. Still, most of the camp is grinning because this isn't just a drink anymore. It's a symbol, a morning rite, something to anticipate, something that says you might freeze today, but first a warm, bitter sludge to remind you that life isn't entirely terrible. By now, coffee making has developed its own rhythm. You've even got preferences. You like your water hot, not boiling. You stir exactly 12 times. You tilt the cup eastward for luck. You've got a ritual, and weirdly it works. Luke Ever, the artist, sings to his brew. It listens, he claims. You nod solemnly, mostly to avoid eye contact. You're sipping your morning fix when you hear it. A sound not of birds or wind, but of projectile coffee cubes. Yes, someone has thrown theirs. Again. Across the trench, a soldier with poor aim and worse judgment has taken to lobbing his coffee ration at a rat. The cube misses and hits a kettle. The kettle topples. Hot water explodes. Chaos. Someone yells, "Coffee attack." Someone else responds, "Only if it's chicory I surrender." There are now rules being discussed about proper cube handling. Officers begin confiscating cubes from the most volatile offenders. One is caught trying to sharpen his into a knife, and yet despite the anarchy, it's working. People are awake, sort of. One notable instance emerges from the 4th Battalion. After a particularly cold, sleepless night, the entire squad forgets to ration their cubes and dump 3 each into a communal kettle. The resulting brew is so potent, it strips the black off their tin cups. But legend says they marched 40 kilometers in under 5 hours and sang sea shanties the entire way, even though none of them had ever seen the ocean. Historians still argue whether this caffeine-fueled surge was real or embellished in the post-war taverns of Lyon. Some say it was an early sign of mass stimulant strategy. Others say it was mostly hallucination, poor math, and trench-induced optimism. Either way, it becomes lore. You finish your cup savoring the last gritty sip and tuck the empty tin back into your coat. The warmth lingers. Not in your hands, in your chest, like memory. And as the march begins, boots in rhythm, the world slightly clearer, you hear something new. Laughter, not loud, not joyful, but shared. And it starts once again with that first bitter sip of day-old instant coffee brewed over a stolen fire, stirred with a twig and held like treasure. Because in a war of mud, frost, and aching silence, caffeine is rebellion, even if it crumbles in your pocket. The march resumes under a sky that can't decide whether it's morning or just perpetually annoyed. Gray hangs low like an old bedsheet stretched across the horizon. Your boots squish with every step, each one a gentle reminder that you haven't been dry since last season. But today, oh today, you feel just a little less dead. Why? Because you're caffeinated. Maybe only slightly. Maybe unevenly. Maybe in a way that gives your stomach ideas about rebellion. But the cube did its work. You're upright, you're alert, you're even humming. And so is everyone else. Strange, isn't it? The same men who weeks ago dragged their feet like haunted marionettes now walk with purpose, or at least more coordinated despair. It's become a thing. Some squads begin tracking their pace after coffee. Pre-cube kilometers are a sluggish mess. Post-cube kilometers, slightly less sluggish but significantly louder, thanks to all the talking and the flatulence. Yes, a delicate subject but unavoidable. The new condensed formula, it turns out, has a reputation. Something about the mixture of chicory, sugar, maybe glue. Who really knows? All you know is that after coffee hour, entire regiments become wind instruments. If Beethoven had been nearby, he could have written a full symphony in B-flat gut. But you endure, because the trade-off is worth it. You're marching farther, faster. You're thinking clearly enough to avoid that hole that ate Luke's boot yesterday. You're dodging low branches instead of letting them smack your face and gently question your life decisions. One officer, young and unreasonably optimistic, claims coffee has cut down on fights in his unit. He says the soldiers bond over brewing rituals, trade recipes, even start using it as currency. 1 cube equals 1 decent pair of socks. 2 cubes appeal as you get to skip trench digging duty for a day. Of course, black markets bloom. A clever corporal runs an underground cube splitting operation. He shaves them into slivers and sells espresso chips. He calls it le crack noir. Command disapproves, but no one shuts him down. Not while morale is climbing. Quirky moment. One morning, a squad forgets to boil water and simply drops the cube into cold wine. The result is horrifying, but they call it a Napoleonic frappe and try to market it as a patriotic innovation. The only thing it inspires is a round of synchronized vomiting and a hasty return to regular water. Still, the experiments continue, and so does the marching. Today, your unit covers 15 kilometers before lunch. Unheard of. The roads are barely roads, more like elongated puddles sprinkled with regrets. And yet, you're alert, focused, not cheerful. Let's not get dramatic, but your legs move with more purpose, your eyes squint a little less. Historians still argue whether the coffee made the army better or just louder. Some believe the caffeine allowed for extended marches, more efficient camp setup. Even keener reaction times in battle. Others point to increased dehydration and the mild panic attacks that happened every time someone had a second cup on an empty stomach. You're inclined to believe both, because as the afternoon crawls into evening and your body starts to fold into itself, like bad laundry, you realize something new. You miss the coffee, you look forward to it. Not just the taste still awful, not just the warmth, but the idea that tomorrow before the mud, the shouting, and the new blister on your left heel, you'll have one calm moment. You'll boil water, you'll watch the cube melt, you'll take a sip and remember you're still here. That's powerful. You settle into camp that night more quickly than usual. Fire pits appear like old friends. Tins clink. There's laughter in the air, punctuated, of course, by the occasional digestive complaint. You boil your water, you drop in your cube, and as steam rises into the dark, cold sky, you smile. Not because it's delicious, not because it's perfect, but because it's yours. And in this endless war of mud marching and morning confusion, even a cube of bitter sludge feels like victory. There's a rumor drifting through the camp tonight, curling around tents like smoke flitting between soldiers as they huddle over fire pits with their tins clutched tight. It starts with a whisper, always a whisper, and grows into a half-believed story, then a certainty carved in stone by breakfast. The British have coffee, too. You nearly spill your cube in disbelief. Is it true? Are the redcoats sipping from steaming mugs while reciting Shakespeare and polishing their buttons? The idea is absurd and yet not impossible. The war, after all, isn't fought solely with sabers and muskets. It's fought with spoons, kettles, and anything that gets your heart beating faster than the cold. This particular rumor suggests that British troops are experimenting with their own version of instant coffee. Though their concoction is allegedly mixed with rum-powdered milk and enough sugar to bribe a horse. Some say it comes pre-packed in waxy pouches. Others insist it's doled out in bricks so sweet it sticks to your teeth like shame. You and Jacques debate this as you stir your own modest brew. Luke claims he met a deserter who tried British coffee once and hasn't blinked since. His left eye just stayed open, Luke says, sipping theatrically. The fire cracks. You sip. You try to imagine British instant coffee. Somehow it tastes like passive aggression and boiled beef. Still, the idea of another army trying the same weird alchemy as yours feels validating. Because at this point, your day is structured entirely around coffee. You wake up thinking about it. You march with it sloshing in your belly. You sleep with your cube wrapped in a sock so no one steals it. It's more than a drink. It's a coping mechanism in cube form. And even officers, those polished, unreadable statues and gleaming buttons, are in on it now. Captain Lefebvre, for example. You've caught him loitering near the lower fires, more often pretending to inspect the terrain while casually warming his hands over a communal pot. He always declines a sip with a polite shake of the head. But then moments later, someone always finds their tin a little emptier. He's not fooling anyone. Even the general staff is rumored to have their own private blend. A dark roast cube supposedly infused with cinnamon and secrecy. Probably pure fantasy. But once you believe in preserved beef that never spoils and boots that shrink when wet elite coffee doesn't feel so far-fetched. Quirky tidbit. A lieutenant in another regiment tried to organize a coffee tasting night. A formal affair allegedly. Blankets folded into tablecloths. Empty cartridges sacked into candle holders. Each soldier presented their variation of brew. The winner was a guy who added dried orange peel and honey. The prize, an extra cube and a mildly sincere round of applause. Historians still argue whether these rituals, these coffee-fueled social moments, had real effects on morale, or were just diversions from the deeper gloom of war. Some scholars suggest caffeine's stimulant properties helped soldiers stay awake on long watches and maintain focus during chaotic battles. Others say it was about control. One part of the day you could predict, prepare for, and sort of enjoy. You lean toward both, because even now the world around you is brutal and indifferent. But this you understand. You boil the water, you unwrap the cube, you stir, you sip, you breathe. Even as distant cannon fire grumbles like an angry stomach on the horizon, even as orders are shouted and the sound of creaking leather signals another long march ahead. You have this tin, this warmth, this bitter, slightly chalky symbol of defiance, and the thought that some British soldier hundreds of yards away might be doing the exact same thing, weirdly comforting. You glance at your squad. Jacques is humming. Luke is asleep on a log, and Captain Lefebvre is inspecting the fire again. You smile, because the world is wide. The war is long, and coffee is now universal. You wake to rain again, of course you do. It seeps into your collar like regret, patters against your eyelids like a judgmental ant, and turns the already swampy road into soup. But you're not even mad, because today you've got 2 coffee cubes. How? You bartered. Traded half a sock and a riddle for an extra ration. Worth it. You boil water with the focus of a scholar defending a thesis. The fire barely holds on under the drizzle, but you shield it with your pack and pure desperation. The first cube goes in, melts instantly. The second, you break it in half, a treat for later. There's something satisfying about having reserves. You sip slowly. And then comes the twist. An officer from logistics' clean boots, slightly smug, approaches your group. Not with orders, not with threats, with a crate. Inside, new coffee cubes, smaller, wrapped in parchment printed with something that looks suspiciously like directions. You blink. Jacques pokes the paper. Instructions, he says, like it's a word from another language. Luke squints. It says to use exactly 250 milliliters of hot water. The squad goes silent. Someone mutters, "Do they think we carry measuring cups?" The officer shrugs and leaves. But the mood shifts, because now coffee cubes are regulated. Standard issue. Measured. Precision engineered by people who've clearly never brewed in a tin can over burning twigs during a thunderstorm. You try one of the new cubes anyway. Smaller, yes, but smoother. Less bitterness. Slightly more flavor. You wouldn't go so far as to call it pleasant, but it doesn't assault your tongue with the usual vengeance. Quirky detail. The wrapper includes a strange little message at the bottom. Pour le courage du matin. For morning courage. Someone in the Ministry of Supplies has been reading poetry again. You stir thoughtfully. The new cubes dissolve faster, less sludge, no chunks of mystery grit. Jacques swears they taste like almonds. Luke claims they taste like boredom. You taste organization, and that's both comforting and terrifying. Because if the coffee's being optimized, what's next? Rations shaped like playing cards, uniforms that don't chafe, campaigns planned around nap schedules. Historians still argue whether this refinement of the coffee cube was a turning point. Some say it marked a shift from desperate survival to genuine efficiency. Others insist it removed all the soul from the drink, that gritty burnt essence that bonded soldiers through shared suffering. You sip again. Okay, maybe it is a little soulless, But your stomach thanks you. And so does your liver. You pack the extra half cube carefully in waxed cloth and tuck it into your sock. You feel powerful. Wealthy even. By afternoon, everyone's talking about the new cubes. Some are hoarding. Others are grinding them into powder for faster brew. A few try to smoke them because of course they do. But the biggest shift is in the ritual. It's faster now, less improvised, less chaotic, and weirdly, less fun. You kind of miss the old cubes, the ones that looked like shrapnel and tasted like burned furniture. There was something pure in their awfulness, something unifying. But this is war, and war adapts, so you adapt too. You learn how to get the new cubes to bubble without boiling, how to balance the cup on a rock for optimal heat, how to stir silently so you don't wake the guy next to you and risk having to share. And slowly, even this new cube becomes normal, acceptable, part of the routine. You finish your cup, you stand, you stretch. Your boots squelch like a man stepping on his dreams. But your blood is warm, your mind is clear, your next march is just a little easier. And as you walk, you glance at the clouds. Still raining, still gray, still better than marching dry without your morning cube. Because at this point, coffee is the war, and you're winning. One measured caffeinated sip at a time. You can feel it before you see it, something different in the way the soldiers move. They're lighter on their feet, more talkative, even bordering on cheerful. It's not spring. It's not victory. It's something more miraculous. The new shipment came early, and it's full of coffee cubes. Not just the small, polite kind from last week. No, these are round. Round. Spheres almost. Wrapped in foil like holiday sweets stamped with the imperial eagle, as if Napoleon himself blessed each one with a caffeine-laced kiss. You hold yours up to the light. It glints. Jacques whistles. Looks expensive. Luke frowns. Looks suspicious. You don't care. You boil your water. You drop the orb in. It hisses, then spins like it's alive. What unfolds next is unexpected. The coffee actually smells good. Not bakery down the street good, but better than burned hair with a whisper of betrayal, which is your usual bar. There's even a hint of spice cinnamon. Maybe nutmeg ground optimism. You sip, you blink. It's smooth, balanced. You glance at Jacques. He's slack-jawed. Luke has stopped mid-rant. Even the sergeant is humming. This batch has changed everything. And soon, word spreads. These new imperial spheres were a result of Napoleon's personal chefs working with chemists to create a morale-boosting luxury ration. A bit of science, a bit of psychology, all wrapped up in a portable orb of temporary bliss. Historians still argue whether this version of the coffee ration ever truly reached all troops. Some say only the elite guards received them. Others claim it was randomly distributed to test effectiveness on general morale. Some even believe the fancy spheres were a propaganda stunt, more myth than mass supply. But you don't care about the debate, because this one, it's real, and it's in your cup. Even the packaging has improved. Instead of rough linen or greasy paper, the spheres come in waxed foil with tiny perforated edges. Soldiers start collecting the wrappers, folding them into stars, making chain decorations in the tent. It becomes an evening ritual drink fold talk. Quirky footnote. One guy in your unit strings 20 foil stars into a necklace. He insists it grants protection. 3 bullets miss him the next day. Now everyone wants one. Foil becomes more valuable than tobacco. But the biggest change, the way you feel, not just physically though, the caffeine is clearly working. Your legs feel less like wet rope. Your eyes stop twitching. But emotionally too, you feel respected. Someone took time to make this. Someone back in Paris thought these grimy, soggy soldiers might like a bit of spice in their mud water, and they were right. The camp shifts. Coffee time becomes an event. You sit in circles now, not huddled for warmth, but gathered like old friends. The spheres are passed around reverently. Boil time is timed precisely. There's a ceremony to it, more tea party than trench crawl. Even Captain Lefebvre joins openly now, not skulking around like a caffeine raccoon. He shares his sphere, cracks jokes, even admits he once tried to grind beans with a bayonet. Terrible idea, he says, still drank it. One evening under a barely visible moon, the company collectively falls into a comfortable silence. Dozens of tins steam in unison. The only sounds are quiet sips, a distant owl, and the soft flicker of firelight. You feel whole for 5 minutes, until someone lights their boots on fire by accident. Still, for those 5 minutes, you weren't soldiers, you were people. People who suffered, joked, stirred, and sipped. And as the fire is stamped out and everyone groans back into their sleeping rolls, you curl up with one final thought. Coffee didn't just keep you alive, it gave you life. Even if it came in a sphere, even if it made your socks smell like cloves, you'd take it again. Every single day, rain again. Not the dramatic stormy kind, but the slow drizzle that seeps through canvas, makes soup out of socks, and reduces morale to something between May and please let me be a goat instead. And yet your hands fumble automatically through your bag, bypassing wet bread dented spoon and that letter from home you're still pretending you haven't read. You find it, your last remaining imperial sphere. It's slightly crushed, still beautiful, still potent. You unwrap it like it's a sacred relic. Carefully fold the foil for later use in StarCraft and drop it into boiling water with a sigh that borders on spiritual. Around you, the morning grumbles awake. Jacques swears at the weather in 3 languages. Luke is arguing with his shadow. The new recruit Baptiste pokes at his tin with the uncertainty of someone wondering if he's about to commit a culinary sin. You lean over, just drop it in. He does. The cube. No, the sphere melts into the water like it's auditioning for opera. A delicate plume of steam rises. Baptiste sniffs, blinks. Oh, he says, stunned. Right, you reply. Because now, even the new guys get it. Coffee isn't optional, it's foundational. And the ritual binds you together like shared trauma, only with slightly more cinnamon. Later that morning, your company reaches a crossroads. Literally. Mud-slicked paths split 3 ways. The map is damp. The sergeant is flustered. And in the middle of the confusion, someone pulls out a coffee tin, lights a fire, and says, "We can't decide anything until we're awake." So you wait, you brew, and then you talk. Calmly, rationally, like humans. It's strange. Historians still argue whether the coffee ritual improved tactical decision-making or simply delayed poor ones. Some reports suggest that units who brewed before battle communicated better and made fewer avoidable mistakes. Others claim this is wishful thinking. Fog of war still fogs even with a double shot. But you remember that morning, how no one shouted, how the group actually listened, how coffee became a mediator, a warm, bitter peacekeeper in a world of bayonets and splinters. And it doesn't stop there. By now, units are customizing their brews with anything they can find. Dried herbs, flower petals, even powdered citrus peels. One squad uses crushed peppermint leaves. Another flavors theirs with old cigar tobacco, which goes badly, but they claim it opens the lungs. Luke, ever the innovator, begins calling his mix Le Café de la Tranchée trench coffee. He even starts labeling the tins with chalk. There's talk of writing a coffee cookbook. A joke at first, then less of one quirky detail. Someone actually begins collecting recipes in a tiny leather notebook, The Infantryman's Guide to Flavored Suffering. It has entries like marsh mud mocha and ditchwater delight. It becomes a prized possession passed from squad to squad. Meanwhile, the supply chain adjusts. You start receiving 2 spheres per week, then 3, sometimes even 5. Word is that a chemist in Lyon has perfected a longer-lasting blend using barley burnt sugar and powdered bean. It sounds awful. It is awful. But it gives more consistent effects, less jitter, more endurance. You test it one afternoon before a forced march. It kicks in around kilometer 4. Suddenly, you're singing songs you didn't know you remembered. Even Jacques dances a little. Luke claims he saw a squirrel carrying a musket. You assume that part was unrelated. Still, it's clear coffee is no longer a fringe benefit. It's embedded, institutional. The army has embraced it as essential kit. Rations now come wrapped in packs that include salt, vinegar, dried lentils, and of course a sphere or two of morale in foil. You wonder if the enemy knows. If they too sit quietly under rain-dripping trees, warming their hands over tin cups, sipping something bitter, whispering the same tired jokes about caffeine being stronger than command. You hope they do, because it makes the war feel less monstrous, more survivable. You tuck the empty tin away. The sphere is gone, but its warmth lingers. You stretch, crack your neck, hoist your pack, and march. Not just because someone told you to, but because today your blood is laced with something better than orders. Something that says, you're here, you're awake, you can keep going. And somehow, you do. Your boots are starting to resemble soup containers. The mud sucks at your soles with the persistence of a toddler needing attention, and your socks haven't been dry since the last emperor. But you're upright, you're alert, and your canteen clinks with a glorious rattle, one last coffee sphere, tucked in like a talisman. This isn't a good day by any stretch. The march has been long. The weather is behaving like a bitter god with a squirt gun, and 2 wagons broke down before breakfast. But your unit is miraculously functioning. Why? Because everyone's had their coffee. It's become clockwork now. You break camp, someone starts the fire, everyone queues up with their tin. There's no formality, no barking orders. The only sound is the collective hush of men waiting for their brew to bubble. Even officers don't interfere anymore. They understand disrupt the ritual, suffer the mutiny. Your squad has developed a system. You carry the tinder. Jacques guards the pot like a dragon with anxiety. Luke handles distribution because he's the only one everyone trusts not to accidentally double his dose. This morning the fire barely catches. The wood is wet. The wind is rude. But somehow, Luke makes it work. He adds a sliver of candle wax to the flame, a trick he picked up from a chimney sweep turned rifleman. The pot simmers, the cube goes in, and the scent rises rich, burnt, and oddly comforting. Baptiste adds a pinch of dried thyme. Jacques adds nothing as usual because purity matters. You add silence. Because sipping this tin of dark, earthy heat is your only quiet moment of the day. By now, coffee has surpassed fuel status. It's language. You can read someone's soul in how they take their brew. Fast gulp. Stress. Slow sipper. Reflective, gentle stirrer. Sentimental. Guy who stabs his tin with a bayonet to release the aroma. Possibly unwell, but you respect the artistry. Quirky footnote. One squad holds coffee confessionals at dusk. Each man takes a sip and shares one embarrassing story. It starts as a joke, ends up saving morale during a miserable 2-week trench stint. Historians still argue whether these social rituals truly fostered cohesion or just masked deeper psychological exhaustion. But those historians weren't ankle-deep in frozen mud, wrapped in wool that smelled like old cheese, sharing warmth through tinned caffeine and shared nonsense. You are. And tonight, you witness something extraordinary. A duel, not over honor, not over love, over coffee. Jacques and a corporal from another company both claim the last remaining cube from a shared supply crate. Tensions rise. Words are exchanged. Insults are hurled. Someone gasps brew thief in disbelief. Instead of violence, Luke proposes a solution, a taste-off. Each man is given 1 tin, 1 cube, and exactly 5 minutes to prepare the most palatable trench brew. A fire is lit. Crowds gather. Even the captain watches, mildly amused. Jacques adds a hint of salt. Classic move sharpens bitterness. The corporal stirs in mashed raisins. Bold, dangerous. They serve. The crowd sips, deliberates, and then a verdict, a tie. They both groan. The captain laughs. The tin is split. The moment immortalized. And from that moment on, your unit starts hosting brew battles once a week. You take it seriously. Judging is blind. There's scoring. There's commentary. Someone draws a little medal on parchment for the winner. You don't realize how much these rituals matter until they're interrupted. 3 days later, no delivery arrives. No cubes, no crates, no coffee. It's a dark, cold morning. The camp is still, quiet, tense. You boil water anyway. Just water. The taste is hollow. The warmth doesn't help. Jacques stares into his tin like it betrayed him. Luc tries to hum, but it comes out cracked. Baptiste asks if anyone wants to chew on bark. No one laughs. The fire burns out early. Conversations falter. Marching begins. And you feel it every kilometer. Every bruise, every damp corner of your body cries out for the ritual you've lost. That night, a courier finally arrives. With crates, cubes, spheres, even new varieties, a cinnamon clove blend and a darker roast that smells like midnight. The camp erupts. Men cheer. One weeps. Another kisses the delivery mule. You don't even wait to unpack. You light the fire in your socks. That first sip, it's not about taste. It's about return. About finding something familiar in a world gone sideways. Because at this point, coffee isn't caffeine. It's identity. The stars are out tonight barely. Thin silver needles poking through clouds like nature's apology. You lie back on your packed tin cup, warm in your hands, steam curling up like lazy ghosts. The fire crackles, muted by the weight of sleep tugging at every eyelid in camp. But no one sleeps just yet. Because tonight's brew is special. A victory roast, someone called it. A new recipe likely created by a quartermaster with too much optimism and a love for nutmeg. The packet says limited batch, winter edition. The foil sparkles faintly. You'd almost think you were drinking something festive instead of wartime sludge with a PR makeover. You brewed it carefully, measured the water like a chemist, stirred with your best twig, whispered to it. Luc claims this makes a difference. No one argues anymore. And now with your cup nearly empty and your belly pleasantly warm, you feel something unexpected. Peace, temporary, thin as thread, but real. It's astonishing how the ritual still holds, even now so deep. Into the war, you can't remember what month it is. The camp has turned quiet, not from exhaustion, but reverence. Because this cup, this brew, this single bittersweet sip is home. Across the fire, Jacques is composing what he calls his caffeine memoirs. He writes with a stub of pencil on the inside of an empty ration box. People need to know, he says solemnly, about the cinnamon incident. Luc carves his tin like it's a diary. He's now etched 11 coffee-related symbols into it. A kettle, a flame, a mug, a goat unclear, and several questionably drawn beans. My legacy, he explains. You just sip. Because tonight the flavor really is different. There's smoothness, yes, less grit, a whisper of sweetness, but also memory. You taste mornings when you didn't want to move, midnights when you needed to stay awake, moments when everything went wrong except the coffee. Even the officers get sentimental. Captain Lefebvre raises his tin in a toast. To endurance, he says, and to whoever invented this stuff. A cheer goes up, tired, cracked, but genuine. It echoes softly across the rows of tents. Historians still argue whether these upgraded rations, fancier cubes, improved packaging. Even flavor variations were really meant for morale or simply part of broader supply reforms. Some claim the army realized just how critical coffee had become, treating it like ammunition. Others believe it was marketing a way to soften war's image with stories of cozy fires and shared brews. But for you, it doesn't matter. Because tonight around that fire, the war doesn't feel quite so heavy. You sip slowly, drawing it out like a story you don't want to end. Quirky footnote. Someone in another regiment created a tiny newspaper called The Morning Mug, circulated weekly. 3 pages hand-copied, filled with reviews of new coffee blends, satirical rankings of who burns their brew the most, and fake interviews with General Espresso. It's wildly popular. Even officers secretly read it. You contributed once. An anonymous haiku. Bitter cube dissolves like orders in hot water, marching again. Ugh, you got second place. First, went to a limerick about a soldier whose coffee cube melted through his sock. Fair. And as silly as it all seems, jokes, poems, rituals, you realize it's all tied to this. This brew, this drink, this strange, muddy companion that's followed you from riverbanks to mountaintops to the deepest, muddiest trenches of your patience. You can survive without sleep, without boots, without proper punctuation. But without coffee, you shudder. No thank you. You cradle your cup. Let the warmth seep into your fingers. You close your eyes. Not to sleep yet, just to rest. Just to remember what still feels good. The fire crackles. Someone snores. The stars blink distant and uncaffeinated. And you smile. Because in this war-torn world filled with noise and orders and endless walking, you found something no cannonball can take from you. A ritual that makes the world feel quiet. Morning again. Damp, familiar, and aggressively beige. You roll over onto a rock that reminds your spine what poor choices feel like. Groaning. You sit up, stretch, and immediately check the most important thing is, there, one more coffee cube. Yes. Crushed slightly, smells like triumph. You brew carefully. No sudden movements. The tin sings as water simmers. That first plume of steam curls upward like a lazy ghost telling you it's going to be okay. Probably, maybe, you hope. The camp stirs slowly today. Not from fatigue, though that's a given, but from something else. Rumors, whispers. One word on everyone's lips, peace. You sip cautiously, not the brew, the idea. Could it be ending? No one dares say it too loud. But still, you see it in how the men talk, laugh, move. As if the fog might lift not just from the field, but from their minds. The war perhaps is unwinding like a long, strange dream. And coffee somehow has been the thread keeping it from unraveling. You go through the morning motions. Pack, check boots, sling rifle. But it's softer now. Not lazy, just gentler. Luke whistles while boiling his cup. Jacques actually shares his cube with Baptiste. Even Captain Lefebvre skips his usual stern nod of inspection and just mumbles, warm enough today like a dad checking the barbecue. You all sit together, in silence. No firewood scrounging, no marching. Just the hiss of water, the occasional cough, and the quiet rhythm of spoons in tins. Quirky detail. Someone starts a coffee journal, a real one, titled Brewlog, A History of Caffeine and Suffering. First entry reads, Today. I think I tasted nutmeg. Or maybe guilt. Either way, still better than tea. You sip. The coffee tastes like it always has, burnt bitter and slightly medicinal, but also like memory. Each swallow carries days of marching nights, of shivering moments of laughter, and those rare seconds where you almost forgot you were at war. Historians still argue whether coffee truly shaped soldier morale, decision-making, or battlefield cohesion. Some believe it was merely a crutch. Others argue it was a secret weapon. You're inclined to believe both, because it didn't fix the mud. It didn't stop the fighting, but it did give you a reason to sit still, to gather, to remember you're human. And tonight, as dusk creeps in, your squad doesn't bother with tents. You all sit under the open sky, sharing the last of your cubes. No one speaks much. There's no need. You sip. You breathe. You feel warmth in your chest, not just from the drink, but from the company. From the strange, stupid beauty of it all. And when you finally curl up wrapped in a musty coat, boots still damp, the tin still warm by your side, your last thought is simple. Coffee saw you through, one bitter sip at a time. And now, let your thoughts soften. The fire crackles gently, low and steady. The night has settled around you like a quiet blanket, cool on your cheeks, warm in your chest. You feel the weight of your limbs melt into the earth, as if the long march of memory has finally slowed. Its boots kicked off, its rifle set aside. There's no need to stir the embers tonight. Your cup is empty now, but the calm it carried still lingers. In the silence after sip, in the shared gaze across a flickering flame, in the stillness you earned by simply enduring, The stars above stretch out like scattered breadcrumbs leading home. You breathe them in. Long, slow, gentle. Each exhale loosens something in your shoulders, something you didn't even know you were holding. Even the war in all its chaos and cold has faded for the moment. There's no marching here, no shouting, just the soft hum of nighttime of fire settling breath, evening hearts remembering how to rest. And you are safe here, in this memory, in this moment. Let your muscles give into the dark. Let your eyelids flutter heavy and still. There will always be morning. There will always be mud, but tonight you've got warmth and silence and the faint ghost of nutmeg drifting through the smoke. Sleep now, friend. We'll stir the pot again tomorrow.